A big protest underway right now in Sanford, Florida, where crowds are gathered at the police station demanding justice for Trayvon Martin and the arrest of George Zimmerman, the man who admittedly shot the Florida teen. Thousands hitting the street this morning wearing Trayvon T-shirts and carrying signs. NBC's Ron Allen is live outside that police department in Sanford. So with a good day to you, Ron, let's get the latest. What's happening there?
Well, it's getting loud here. A huge crowd of people just walked through a neighborhood in Sanford, and they've just arrived here at this police department. You can see behind me, perhaps, and you can hear certainly. It's a crowd in the hundreds, maybe 1,000 or more. I can't quite see all the way down the street from where they started coming, but they're still coming. Leaders of this march are Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Al Sharpton, and other activists from across the country who are here to, of course, press the demand for the arrest of George Zimmerman. A lot of families are here, a lot of children are here, a lot of young people are here. Some students from the high school that Trayvon Martin attended in Miami are here as well, leading this march to try and keep the momentum for this demand, this public outrage for the arrest of George Zimmerman. There's a similar event tomorrow afternoon in Miami. And of course, this is happening now while this case has become somewhat complicated and muddled. The family of George Zimmerman has been pushing back hard, trying to tell his side of the story as well. So it's important, I think, for the marchers, the protesters, to try and keep the momentum up. So we'll have to see how big the numbers are here today. There's also some concern in the town of Sanford growing about these protests. Some merchants are saying that it's bad for business, it's bad for the town's reputation. But for now, the people here, many of them residents of this town, are determined to keep up this demand, this pressure on the police, the prosecutors, to arrest George Zimmerman. Alex?
Yeah, and Ron, given the fact that this has been a topic that has dominated the national headlines, to what extent are there people from outside the Sanford, Florida area there?
It's hard to know the breakdown of the crowd. There were quite a few buses that came rolling in here. Some people said that they were on buses for 6-7 hours from all parts of Florida, across the region. You know, this is just one manifestation of this. There are protests online. There are protests in other parts of the country. This is an ongoing thing. The numbers here, though, are big. It's growing. It's a large crowd. There hasn't been this big a demonstration in this town in a while now, and there's some questioning whether or not the movement, if you will, had a lot of momentum. And that's one thing that people are trying to establish today, that this demonstration, this protest, this demand for justice still has a lot of momentum going.
Indeed. Alex? Okay. NBC's Ron Allen, many thanks for the live report. A bit later this hour, I'll be speaking with NAACP President and CEO Ben Jealous about today's march. I'm also going to speak with Bob Herbert. Developing right now, a rally for Trayvon Martin right now underway in Sanford, Florida. As we give you a live look at things there, where thousands have gathered at the Sanford Police Department. They are calling for the arrest of Martin's admitted killer, George Zimmerman. Earlier, the NAACP led that march through the streets. Meanwhile, this week, other big developments in the case. George Zimmerman's brother spoke publicly defending his brother. We saw new security camera video of Zimmerman on the night of the shooting. And today, NBC News has learned details on the police arrest of Zimmerman back in 2005. As well, the city of Sanford is looking for an interim chief. So far, no arrests have been made. Bob Herbert, distinguished senior fellow at Demos, is joining me now, and I'm glad you're back with me. Thanks for being here, Bob, because we talked about this last week, and we've had all these latest developments now. Can you give us, after this week of progress, if there's been progress, where we stand in the case?
Well, the real problem is that it's taking so long. So the longer the investigation drags out, the more difficult it would be to get a conviction if indeed Zimmerman did anything that was criminal. It just makes it more difficult.
Wait, Bob, do you think there's a problem from the outset at any level because of the bungling of the case from the beginning by police, the lack of evidence?
Exactly. It's a problem from Jump Street. I think that it would be very difficult to sustain a murder charge, no matter what really happened in that incident. The other thing that's problematic is the longer this goes on, the more the case gets tried in the court of public opinion. You don't want to see that in a high-profile case. We saw what happened after the O.J. Simpson verdict. We saw what happened with the riots in L.A. You know, so you just don't want that to happen. And so that's mitigated if you have an investigation that the public has confidence in. That's not what we have right now.
Is there any way to avoid this seeming sort of churning of the legal process right now, that it goes on and on and on before we get some sort of an answer?
I don't think there is. I don't think you can speed it up. You know, the Justice Department is looking at the case, but that's a long procedure. If the federal government were to intervene, it would be essentially a civil rights case. But this is the kind of case that's supposed to be handled at the state level. You know, it's a suspected homicide case, but so far, what we're ending up with are demonstrations, and it's becoming the latest fad on the internet.
We've heard a lot of people try to put this entire situation into context via race. Tell me where we stand now on that.
I think that it's clearly a racial situation. I mean, Zimmerman, we hear on the 911 tapes that he said when he first talked about spotting Trayvon, he said he's got his hand in his waistband and he's a black male. So he was just focused on the fact that he was black from Jump Street. Then we had the enhanced tapes that seemed to suggest that he had made an awful racial slur. So I don't think there's any question that it's a racial case. What is unfortunate is what happens so often in these cases is that the public's approach to the case begins to break down largely along racial lines. So, you know, you don't like to see that happen.
Although, if you look at the crowd, I mean, it's clear that they're representatives from every walk of life.
Well, you have an awful lot of whites who are outraged about this case. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But if you for example, if you go onto the internet and you start looking at some of the reactions to the posts on the various blogs and the news reports, then you see a very ugly scene, and you know, a lot of racism, and in addition to that, there's been a fair amount of racism coming from blacks. I mean, attacks on Zimmerman that I think are beyond the pale. So that's what I mean when I say what you want is an investigation by the authorities that you can have confidence in, and then have it move at a reasonably swift pace.
How about today? Marches like this, protests and marches and rallies for justice, which is one of part of the official name of this. Do you think these kinds of events can help quell the dissent, quell the difficulties, or does it incite as well?
Now, I think that the marches are helpful as long as the marches remain peaceful, which they have been. Then I think that yeah, I know. Then I think that they're helpful because they do bring attention. Attention becomes focused on the case. I mean, if there hadn't been the public outcry, we probably wouldn't even have gotten this far in the investigations. What you don't want is for the marches and the demonstrations to spiral into some kind of vigilante protest. We're not interested in that. The marches should be a cry for justice in this case.
But until, again, getting back to the question of the churning of the legal process, I mean, you know, the wheels of justice move slowly, is the phrase. How much do you worry about vigilante justice?
I do worry about it. There have been, as you point out, there have been a couple of instances. Once again, if you look on the internet, there have been some things posted that I think have been outrageous, which you don't want to see. So you have to be careful about that. And I think the organizers of the marches, the demonstrations, the protests, they have an obligation to try and prevent that sort of thing from spiraling out of control.
Okay, Senior Fellow at DMOS, Bob Herbert, thanks so much. We'll see you again, no doubt. You too.